So, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to 15th session of South Asian Online Literary Conference. And this session is devoted to paper presentations. And Mr. Suresh Goyal, he will be chairing the session. I request Mr. Suresh Goyal to lead the session, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rajendraji. This is, since we have lost a lot of time already on technicalities, therefore, I will start the session now by inviting Mr. Ramji Timalsina. I do not know if I'm pronouncing your second name correctly or not. Ramji Timalsina, he will speak on Nepali transnational life and literature in South Asia. And as per the format for the session, I will also request him to give a very brief introduction to himself before starting the paper. Total, you will have 10 minutes for your introduction and the paper. And your time is starting now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Goyal. Namaskar. Good afternoon. I am Ramji Timalsina from Nepal. I am a faculty of Tribhuvan University. And my area of work is Nepali diaspora and transnationalism, especially focusing on Nepali poetry and literature. I am a PhD from Nepal Sanskrit University. Today I am going to present on the topic Nepali transnational life and literature in South Asia. I'm happy to be with Dr. Kaur and all of you dignitaries in this session. Here, the term Nepali transnational life, I mean people who are living outside Nepal. Outside Nepal, it means the present geographical boundary of Nepal, which was fixed about 2¼ century back. In this area, people who migrated from Nepal across the border in South Asia, from that time, and have been migrating till now, and those who have been making communities have already made communities in different SAARC countries. This is the focus of my study and my presentation. And we can find there is a constant ebb and flow of people across the border of Nepal for millennia. But at present, if we focus upon the present migration trend, many Nepali people migrate to India, Bhutan, Bangladesh, even Sri Lanka, Maldives, up to Pakistan also. And this ebb and flow of people is connected with the ebb and flow of goods and emotions at the same time. Emotions as well as ideas. This cross flow of people, emotion and ideas, not in the governmental level, but in the people's level, is what we mean by transnational approach, transnational approach, or approach sometimes. And this is my focus of study and presentation today. The record shows that Nepali people live in 153 countries in the world, but my focus is on SAARC countries only today. The record in this area of migration shows that at present around 8 million Nepali people, or the people of Nepali origin, are living in India. 650,000 around people are living in Bhutan, people of Nepali origin now too. Around 7,000 Nepalis with around 1,000 households, they are living in Bangladesh. Even in Pakistan, there are a few people of around 200 to 300 without any household. They are people for temporary settlement. In Maldives, there are around 10,000 people. In Sri Lanka, a few thousand. Even in Afghanistan, there are 10 to 15,000 people living nowadays also. This is the current statistics of the Nepali living outside Nepal as a transnational Nepalis in SAARC region, in South Asian region. And when I talk about transnationalism and transnational people, we have two types of migration. One type is the people who have the permanent settlement where they have reached. Excuse me, iPlayer, who is this? Would you please switch off your microphone? It
Can
is
you please,
disturbing.
please, Mohanji, can you please mute yourself? You're
Okay,
joined in
thank
two
you.
places, sir. Please, only one is enough. You please log out of another. Mohanji, please, because it is echoing.
Thank you, sir. I think it's okay now.
Yeah.
And there are two types of settlements, people in this area. One are the people who have permanent settlement, who have their own household, families, societies, cultural development, histories of settlement in such regions. Especially people in India, Bhutan, and Bangladesh. I mean, Nepali people in India, Bhutan, and Bangladesh have this type of permanent settlement in this region. Mostly in India, there are in many parts of India, mostly neighboring to Nepal, there is the very dense population of Nepali people. If you look at northeast India, Assam, Sikkim, West Bengal, Darjeeling area, even in the Uttarakhand, there are people who have very dense population of Nepali origin. If you look at Bhutan, in the southern Bhutan, that is the plain of Bhutan, there are many Nepali people and who are called Lotsampa, and they stay there with their families for more than 150 years with permanent settlement. If we look at Bangladesh, near Dhaka and around, there are people, who have the permanent settlement, permanent job, and they have been growing their families for generations. Only in these three countries of South Asia, we have the permanent settlement of Nepali migrants. In case of other countries, there's Pakistan, Maldives, Sri Lanka, and Afghanistan, we don't find in record still the permanent settlement of Nepali migrants, but there are people who stay there temporarily. And those people in the first category I talked about, permanent settlements, they have grown Nepali diaspora in India, Bhutan, and Bangladesh. But whereas in other countries, Pakistan, Maldives, Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, they are only transnational mobiles. It means they reach there for some purpose, for economic purpose, for education purpose, for other purposes. They reach there, and once their purpose is fulfilled, they come back to Nepal. Their permanent home is Nepal. That's why these are the people whom theoretically are called transnational mobiles. So my concern here is of the both type of people, Nepali diaspora in the SAARC region, as well as Nepali transnational mobiles in the SAARC region. The next point here is, except in Bhutan, even in India and Bangladesh, there are large number of transnational mobiles, transnational Nepali mobiles who go there, keeping their home back at Nepal, and then they work there, and then they come back once their objectives are fulfilled. And the third category also, which is not under my study, that transnational outsiders who don't have the permission to work, in those countries, but these transnational mobiles are permitted. They have Nepal as their home, and then they come back once their purpose is fulfilled. And similarly, in diaspora are the people in these three countries, right? In these three countries who are legally and permanently settled, emotionally connected to Nepal, right? And they have developed Nepali society there. And my concern here is, my study is mostly on their literature. I have just 1 minute left, I know. So I'll just be cutting it short out, right? And the literature they write are of also two types: diasporic literature and transnational mobiles literature. Diasporic literature mostly done in India, Bhutan, and Bangladesh, mostly in India, right? They have generations of writings, and their main concern is the life of the Nepali community, Nepali diaspora in India. Their pains, their problems, their dreams, their futures, all these things are there. And similarly, in Bhutan also, we have these things. my paper in detail will be talking about how these literary writings have the recordings of emotions, feelings, and dreams of Nepali people in those countries. With this, I'd like to thank you all for patient listening and giving me the opportunity for presentation. Thank you all. Namaskar.
In the interest of saving time, I'm not going to make any comment on the paper presented by Mr. Timal Sinha. In any case, it has been recorded, and I understand that this will form part of the collection to be published. Can benefit from the complete presentation of your paper. So without trying to sum it up or comment, of which I'm not capable of, but thank you very much. I will now go on, Mr. Mohan Himthani Aji. Kindly do introduce yourself and also present your paper. In total, you have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Namaskar, sir.
Sir, you have to unmute yourself in the iPad. Please log out of the phone, please. Otherwise, echo is coming, sir. We are unable to hear you. Yeah,
Hello.
yeah. Thank you.
You are getting me, sir?
Yes, sir.
Namaskar, sir. Namaskar, all of. Good afternoon. And first of all, congratulations to Sahitya Academy and Koswal and Madam Majid Kaur. Very warm regards to all of you. And interesting sessions are going on last 3 days. And congratulations again to all for connecting all the South Asian literary families on one platform. It's very enriching. Today, I'm going to speak about Sindhi poetry, contemporary Sindhi poetry. First of all, in short, myself, Mohan Himthani, writing poetry in Sindhi, and apart literary criticism, one book also, 5 books published in poetry, and one of translation also. And it's all. Let's start about contemporary Sindhi poetry. Past 2 decades. Speaking of poetry, the first thing that occurs to the mind is what exactly is poetry all about? Is it that human being on earth is a potential poet, or is poetry some sort of special activity which only a few rare people are capable of? What is that space inside of man where the earth and sky meet in the context of poetry? We can get the answers to these questions by listening to the melody continuously playing within each individual and contained in every atom of nature. Whoever has caught the frequency of that melody and has attuned to that is actually a poet. In the literary language, we call it sensitive mind or sensitivity, which plays an important role in forming a poet or an artist. Poetry is the feelings, thoughts, and experiences of the world and life around a person. It is struggling to express itself just like a frog in the pond struggling to jump out of the water. And on jumping out, the relief that it experiences can be felt only by a sensitive mind. In other words, poetry is sort of software or a medium to speak and share with life and nature. This has been the case since the beginning of man, that using poetry as medium to share his inner dialogue and experiences with others. Even today, poetry is appreciated by every class and age group. Poetry has been the expression of happiness in all times. It is an outlet for the expression of misery and suffocation. Poetry's way of facing difficult situations of life and death. It is the power to overcome such difficulties. It gives new directions and inspiration to life. Emotional wounds are healed through poetry. Poetry is a sound sleep within restlessness. It is the breeze in hot afternoons, and it is the soft, gentle shades such as the relationship between poet and poetry. It says everything so effortlessly like magic, and in that such a manner that the listener identifies with it. भावना तो आघातों को एकदम ठीक कर देती है कविता। उन्नीदे दिनों में चैन की नींद है कविता। जिंदगी की जलाती तपती जेठ की दोपहरी में आषाढ़ के बादलों सी ठंडी नरम छांव है कविता। और पता नहीं क्या क्या है कविता। यही है कवि और कविता का संबंध, जादू जैसा। सब कुछ आसानी से कह जाती है, जैसे हर सुनने वाले की अपनी ही बात हो। Let's talk about now changing temperament and new sensibility in contemporary Sindhi poetry. While it is true that since the past few years, the poetry in Indian languages has gone through new style and temperaments, it is also true that Sindhi poetry too is conscious of its own progress and identity, especially nowadays since it is becoming difficult to express truth through the medium poetry. The Sindhi poetry has been searching for new spaces of sensibility and reality and trying to make its presence felt. In order to find out what new spaces has the Sindhi poetry crossed into, it is necessary to first understand something from acclaimed Sindhi poet and critic Harish Vaswani, who is undoubtedly one of the pioneers of new Sindhi poetry in India. He says, there is no specific background of the time and space of Sindhi literature, excepting that when the new poetry opened its eyes to Sindhi poetry, except some exceptions, was passing through two important situations, namely emotion without thought and thought without emotion. This value judgment of Harish Vaswani regarding the Sindhi contemporary poetry was made in middle of 80s. Although 25 years have passed since, the Sindhi poetry has traveled into new spaces and skies. But these sentences spoken by an alert critic are relevant even today, encouraging Sindhi poetry and poets to become more creative and conscious. While talking about new sensibility and style of Sindhi poetry, we shall have to begin with pointing out at new emerging generations since last few years who have not only attracted attentions to themselves, but have also made their presence felt. Looking at these voices, it is quite obvious that these new fellow travelers of Sindhi poetry actually feel poetry, speak poetry, understand poetry. They are also aware of that poetry is not just about words, but it is all around life. Bharti Sadarangani, some few voices are. Bharti Sadarangani speaks of forgetting of her lover, realizes by doing that even she disappears. Today I thought, and I will forget you now. Your smile, your laughter, your innocence, your touch, your talks, I have firmly decided. I repeated to myself, I will forget you. I have forgotten you. I have come and stood before the mirror. You were not there behind me, but even I was missing in the mirror. Similarly, Manoj Chawla speaks of impossibility of meaningful dialogue between lovers. He says, you always doubt my words. You feel my talk as little dusty. Therefore, I have gargled with milk and bathed with words clean. Even then, your doubt on me that I might have mixed poison in the milk. How can we sit and talk then? Likewise, Rekha Pohani, Kailash Shadab are very good examples of new sensibilities entering romantic situations. Kailash Shadab says, you have not enjoyed life at all. Have you ever eaten banana dipped in the tea and biscuits in wine? Just do it and see. If you don't enjoy, change my name to Mani. Poetry has been like medium of effective dialogue between the reader and poet. It is important to have new subjects and originality of expression, and for this, the role of poetic consciousness is the crux of matter. In this regard, it will be worthwhile to hear wise words of Doyen Sindhi literature, eminent Sindhi critic Satish Roda, who writes, the new contemporary poetry is not about learning or even writing. It is rather something to be lived. The person who does not possess life experiences and deep feelings is not capable of seeing social realities on a personal level.
Find up करने के लिए 1 minute.
Anything, sir? Such a person cannot understand. When we speak of Sindhi poetry, we have to speak of heightened sensibilities of tall figures in traditional Sindhi poetry also.
Please conclude.
Yes.
Arjun Hasid, for example, in recent past had a made pleasant entry in the modern Sindhi poetry. The shade is on.
The next session.
In this context, what is going on, sir? Anything else, sir?
No, Ajit ji and Suresh ji are telling, please conclude.
Conclude, sir.
Yeah, yes.
Okay. The important thing that I have to say about Sindhi poetry is that this constant change with times has been quite discernible and evident. It is very important for the poet to keep himself updated with events in language, expression, and experiments happening around him in the society. The time that we are passing through is not an ordinary time. It is digital phase where so much is changing around us every moment. Naturally, in this fast changing phase of society, words change their meanings so often. Expressions change their styles and values to keep changing. It is very necessary to be aware of all these changes for a poet to realize that language takes him to the places where he may have not gone before. In this category, strong voices of Sindhis are Namdev Tarachandani, Dr. Prem Prakash, Nanda Javeri, Mohan Thani, Bimi Sadarangani, Harish Karamchandani, Arun Babani, Rashmi Ramani, Moini Ngorani, Veena Karamchandani, Jaya Jadwani, and all in these poems, it is clearly discernible that the language belongs today, times, and has an artistic experiment streak. There are very few women writers in Sindhi who have left a strong impression of their unique sensitivity. And Maya Rahi is one such name, whose work is mainly about women in urban settings. When I wanted to love you, wanted to kiss your lips, but I felt some other lips already present there. When I wanted to hold your hand, I felt the presence of another hand there. When I wanted to share my love through my eyes, I felt my eyes being stuck to some other eyes. You are my life partner, but I don't know how many other life partners you have had. Likewise, just
मोहन
finally I would
अभी
say,
कितना है आपका टाइम काफी पहले खत्म हो चुका था, अभी बचा है कितना? कंक्लूड
बस एक सेकंड, एक मिनट. Finally I would say,
Please let us speak.
अजीत जी कोई बात नहीं, एक मिनट ठीक है जी, कीजिए.
Finally, I would say the expressions of poetry and its depth are as many as such life itself. Regarding Sindhi contemporary poetry and its changing temperament, a poet and critic of eminence, Vasudev Bhoi, has said, today's Sindhi poetry possesses quality of using language creatively and experimentally, such a use of Sindhi language with new ideas, new expressions, poetic pictures were never found in older Sindhi poetry. Prem Prakash also said the wine of Sindhi poetry, contemporary poetry, can definitely and proudly be served in any mahfil of Indian languages. Today's Sindhi poets have accepted the challenges of changing times and changing world, are strongly grounded in their situation. Namaskar.
I'm very sorry, Mohan ji, that we had to cut you short, your presentation short. Unfortunately, the constraints of time.
Okay.
With your permission, Ajit ji and Achan ji, I will now start my presentation. My name is Suresh Goyal. I started in 2013 as the Director General of the Indian Council for Cultural Relations. And nowadays, I'm working with certain prominent think tanks on the idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. And therefore, I thought I'll speak on pluralism in not just the Indian society, but as the idea of what human civilization ought to be. And I think I should take only 5 minutes. Please do stop me if I'm exceeding my time. Prime Minister Modi, when he was speaking at the United Nations General Assembly, he described India as the mother of democracy. And that phrase has come under quite a bit of discussion, some critical, some adulatory, for describing India as the mother of democracy. because not many people understand what it can actually be. However, if I were to really just do a bit of analysis myself coming from the background that I come from, uh, democracies can be institutional. As the British, the United Kingdom left India with parliament, judiciary, executive, bureaucracy, all independent from each other and yet working with each other, electoral democracy, one person, one vote, etc., etc. That is institutional democracy. Uh, what I think the Prime Minister Modi had in mind was not institutional, but democracy to be defined in terms of civilizational ethos. And from that point of view, if we look at our own cultural background, our civilizational background, uh, I do feel that democracy has been part of our thinking. And here, I would like to say, thinking not only of India, I would define here as a South Asian culture because even if geographically and geopolitically we are different countries, I think at a cultural and civilizational level, there is so much in common amongst all of us. Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, you name it, Afghanistan, I can go ad nauseum to describe the commonalities. But therefore, at cultural and civilizational level, in terms of talking of India, I will basically be talking about the South Asian subcontinent, where we all belong to culturally. So culturally and civilizationally, we have been the kind of people for whom democracy and independence of ideas have been an article of faith. Whether we talk about the kingdom of Magad, whether we talk about the Vedic times, we talk about the Harappan civilization, at all times, there is evidence that people have been participants in the models of the government from that time onward. And therefore, when we talk about the argumentative Indian, it is simply not the idea of Amritya Sen. It is actually a fact. And we notice it every day that we like to argue and debate about everything possible, even if it is lengthy, cantankerous, very, very argumentative, and sometimes leading to those kind of fights you see on the street. But nonetheless, argumentation, the debate remains an article of faith for us. And therefore, I think at the civilizational level, democracy has been a part of the subcontinental civilization and the culture. Uh, in that sense, I think if we were to talk about inclusiveness in governance, and from that comes the pluralism, irrespective of whichever way our individual identities have developed. And I would say that even if we began in the same crucible millennia ago, and the earliest evidences go up to at least in terms of documentation, Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, even though some people claim that the Vedic civilization precedes all that, whatever it is. I mean, that's a question of really academics to debate, but the fact is that in the same crucible, individual identities and the identities of the different groups may have evolved in a different manner. And in those identities, I would count our friends from Nepal. You developed in the Tarai region, you developed in the mountain region. I will count our friends from Sri Lanka, Tamils, everywhere. And in terms of religion, I would count the Parsis who came from Iran. I will count the Islam when it came into India, almost at the same time that it developed in Middle East. The Christianity which came to Kerala first from almost at the same time when it developed in Europe. In that sense, the real identities of different groups and individuals may have developed differently along different trajectories in the same crucible. And yet, we belong to the same common crucible. And from that point, I would say that at a microcosmic level, in a microcosm of the South Asian civilization, we belong to the same plural community who believe that even if we are different, if in terms of identity, even if we have evolved differently, eventually we belong to the same plane of civilization where we share the same values. In that sense, I would compare the pluralism to, I do not know how many people will agree with me there, but when I think of pluralism, the vision that comes to my mind is the Brahman Swarup of Krishna, where you have universes going around each other, energy mutating, changing, transforming, and yet there is a kind of a boundary within which everything goes, turns around. They mutate and yet they remain same. So in that sense, the constancy of the ideas, the constancy of existence, even though they are changing all the time, to my mind is the true nature of what we call Vasudev Kutumbakam. And that is the true spirit of what we are really, that the whole universe is same, even if we have evolved in different manner. And therefore, it pains me deeply when I see things taking place in Afghanistan after Taliban has come over. It pains me very deeply.
Sureshji, I mean, I just received a message. Ajit madam has to join the next session. So,
2
can you
minutes.
please, yeah,
2 minutes.
please.
Yes, I'll just take 2 minutes.
Yes,
So,
yes.
it pains me deeply when I see what is happening in Afghanistan, rights of women, the way the women are being treated, the way children are being trampled. It pains me deeply when I see the freedoms of other people being trampled on in the other countries of the region, including my own. And we are no different. When I see that, therefore, you know, you have the terms like love jihad, etc., which are coming up, which are not there before. On the whole, I would say that ultimately it is Vasudev